welcome back. My name is Christian Justison, and I'm the Director of Public Legal Access at Legal Aid Ontario. And it's my pleasure to host the next panel, which is on the Legal Services Corporation. We have David Bonebrake, who's the Program Consultant at the Legal Services Corporation of the United States. For those of you who don't know about the Legal Service Corporation, it is one of the largest single funders of civil legal aid in the United States, and each year they provide funding to more than 130 independent legal aid programs that have more than 800 offices across the United States. In addition to this, the Legal Services Corporation has a number of grant programs, and the one that we're really excited to talk about today, and the one that David's involved with, is the Legal Grants Program, Initiatives Grants Program, which provides funding for technology programs that can be scalable across the United States. So I don't think I'll say much more. I think I'll turn it over to David, who has a presentation. Hello, David.
Hi, Kristen. Can you hear me okay?
Can hear you great.
Wonderful. Great. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. Am I still there?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I just saw a message popped up that Skype for Business has stopped working, so I'm a little concerned, but let's just go through, and hopefully that's not an issue.
You're loud and clear.
Okay, interesting. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. It's a pleasure to talk to you a little bit about our experience with legal aid technology in the United States. And I'm going to focus on a kind of a narrow issue of how, as a national funder, the Legal Services Corporation has been able to develop an infrastructure across the U.S. that really supports both innovation in legal aid technology, but also replication and sharing of those innovations from one program to hopefully many programs across the U.S. We always kind of wonder about our branding of our grant program. So we're the Technology Initiative Grant Program, or sometimes called TIG. So sometimes we think maybe we should reevaluate our branding a little bit there.
Hello, David. Hello, David. Are you still with us?
Give us 2 minutes.
There was a problem with the connection. We're just going to take a 2-minute break and get David. Hello, David. I think we have you back.
Okay.
We're just waiting for you. We haven't got your presentation, but we have you.
Okay. Well, sorry about that. Hopefully that's not a sign of...
Oh, you're loading up.
Okay. Well, hopefully folks, am my screen set?
Yes, you're good to go. Some background technology in the TIG program.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, that's where I will start then. So the TIG program is our special technology innovation grants program at the Legal Services Corporation. And we always kind of laugh about the branding and maybe whether we need to reevaluate it and just call it the technology grants program, because even just now I stumbled over it and called it the innovation program. But what's interesting about our technology grant program is that it's actually been around now for 16 years. So this started all the way back around 2000, and since that time we've actually awarded at $53.2 million in technology grants to over 640 civil legal aid organizations across the United States. Our grants are as small as $20,000 projects to $30,000. Most of our grants fall within the $50,000 to $100,000 range, and we do have a few kind of big ticket items that we fund in cycles as well. Our grants go exclusively to the existing 134 grantees that the Legal Services Corporation funds to provide civil legal services. This year we had an appropriation of about $4 million to provide grants. We're actually in the process of awarding projects, funding for projects right now. In terms of what we fund, we really focus on three areas. We're a technology grant program, so we want to fund technology projects, obviously, but a lot of our focus on technology is on looking at the unmet legal needs of low-income people in the United States. So we have in the U.S., as well as I know many other places across the country, a significant problem with massive unmet legal need, which leads to a crisis in courthouses of a huge number of litigants who are trying to represent themselves in cases that were never designed for them to do so. And so a lot of what we ultimately fund are self-help focused products, and these are, the vast majority of these are web products, because that's just how you deliver things through technology to consumers at this point. But it's interesting, our appropriation language actually mentions self-help before it mentions technology. So the language that Congress provides us with our funding that instructs us on what we're supposed to do prioritizes this concept of self-help even before it talks about the role of technology in that. So it really is addressing that self-represented litigant crisis. The second part of what we fund is we look for things that are innovative and creative. This is not a grant program that's about basic technology infrastructure. We think basic technology infrastructure is very important. In fact, we think it's so important that it should be funded through a legal aid organization's basic operating cost. It's just as critical as putting a roof over your staff's head, providing desks and offices and chairs for them. Basic technology is that critical. But what we focus on with TIG is this whole idea of what are these experimental projects? How can we adapt, the technologies that are emerging, whether it's Silicon Valley or the open source movement or whatever it may be? How can we adapt those to the legal aid sector so that we're, truly innovating and providing creative solutions that are expanding the number of low-income people who get legal assistance? And then the third thing we focus on with our funding is creating this national infrastructure and supporting replication of projects across the country. And that's really what I'm going to focus on today. I think over our decade and a half of providing legal assistance, this is something that we've been very successful in doing, which is creating this national ecosystem that not only supports innovation at legal aid programs, but has mechanisms in place that make it easy for other legal aid providers across the country to adopt technologies that are proven through experimental sort of proof of concept projects at one or two organizations. And I think there's four components to that. The first two are the ones I really want to focus on, but I'll also talk a little bit about items 3 and 4. But I think what we've been able to do really successfully here in the States is outline a clear vision for what we think technology should be doing in a legal aid office currently, as well as what technology can potentially do in legal aid offices going forward. And there's two documents that I'll talk about, our Technology Summit Report and our LSE Baselines document, and both of those I think are critical to that vision. Another thing that I think we've done very well is we've actually developed the technical infrastructure and platforms that allow for easy replication. So these are the tools that are out there. A lot of these now follow kind of the cloud-based software as a service type of model where they're hosted solutions that we've worked on with vendors that make it really easy for a program that is maybe not doing something in a particular technology area to begin an initiative, and if there's enough interest to really ramp up that initiative and turn it into something very impressive and impactful, hopefully pretty easily. The third point is the emphasis that we've put on replication and adaptation at all stages of our grant program. So just like a lot of other grant programs, applicants submit proposals, and if they're funded, they submit a lot of reporting throughout the grant period, and they also do a closeout. And really at all stages of the grant program, we emphasize this concept of replication, and applicants and then grantees need to discuss how their project fits into this national system of legal aid technology and, to some degree, national legal aid service delivery system that we're trying to build through innovative tech. And then the fourth point, and I won't talk about this too much, but I probably will give you a bit of a sales pitch, maybe at the end if I have time. We convene a conference too. We do an annual conference we called the TIG conference. Last year it was in San Antonio, or I'm sorry, this year in January it was in San Antonio in the middle of January. We had about 300 people attend. We're going back January 2017 to San Antonio. In addition to having a very mild winter, which is probably good for folks up in your neck of the woods, it's also a really exciting, really inspiring conference where people work very hard throughout the year on their tech projects, and they come together to share as much information as possible over 2.5 to 3 days. So that's been very helpful as well. I want to start with, though, this idea of kind of outlining a vision for how technology can be used, because I think it's really important to how we've been able to move forward with a lot of these national technology efforts and how we hopefully will continue to in the future. What I want to talk about first is what I think is probably our greatest success in this area. A few years back, in about 2011, 2012, LSC decided to convene a national technology summit on the use of tech and expansion of tech in civil legal aid. And we did this over 2 parts. The first part was in 2012, and then the second part was early 2013. And between the 2 parts, we brought together 75 experts, and it was truly a cross-disciplinary group. There were people from the medical field, there were innovators from government and private practice and the startup world. And they were all came together to really help us establish what our vision would be for the use of technology, and then also how could we actually go about implementing it and making it happen. And so at the end of 2013, out of the 2 summits, we created a report on, we affectionately call it the Technology Summit report. You can see our branding again maybe leaves a little bit to be desired. The full name is the Report of the Summit on the Use of Technology to Expand Access to Justice. Nonetheless, I think it's a very good report. It is something that is I think does 2 things really well that a report of any type needs to do. First of all, it explains our vision and the technology that we hope to use to achieve it in very plain language. So it's something that is accessible to someone who is a non-technical attorney, or the leadership of a legal aid program. They can hopefully read through it and understand what we're trying to convey very easily. The second thing that I think it accomplishes is that it is short, and I think being short is absolutely critical. You can read through this report in about 30 minutes, and by read through, I don't mean skim. I think you can actually sit down, get through the full report, and synthesize the ideas in it in 30 minutes. But it's it's something that we were really purposeful about. We wanted to make sure that it was very much consumable by folks, that they wouldn't ignore it, that they'd pay attention to it, and that they could easily get through it. And so the summits and then the summit report really had the central focus of exploring the potential of technology to move the United States toward providing some form of effective assistance to 100% of persons otherwise unable to afford an attorney for dealing with essential civil legal needs. And this is, at the time was kind of a new concept. I mean, legal aid providers do fantastic work. They work incredibly hard, and they are creative and innovative, including with uses of technology. But, they unfortunately only serve a fraction of the people who need assistance, largely because of, the limited resources that are available to do so. This vision, I think it's a very optimistic vision, but for folks who do believe technology can, fundamentally change the way we do a lot of things in the social service world and the nonprofit world, this is something that is an ambitious goal that we felt that we can work towards. And so this was the summit mission statement. When we actually published the report, this became the central theme of the report, and the rest of the report really focuses on how we can implement technologies around this vision to actually make it happen and leverage technology to provide some form of assistance to everyone who can't afford it in the U.S. And I would say the central idea, not getting too much into the details of the report, but the central idea, what we really wanted to focus on was this concept of a statewide triaging portal where people would go into the portal who needed legal aid, they would describe their circumstances, and then an intelligent system would exist that would be able to direct people to the service that was most likely to meet their legal need, given a range of factors, including some pretty sophisticated factors, including total cost of the service to the justice system, the complexity of the legal problem, and how likely an individual would be how likely an individual would be able to represent themselves in a civil legal matter versus having to rely on assistance from a provider, and a range of other factors. But that was the central idea, was this statewide justice portal that was involved robust triaging. And so out of our summit and our report, I would say we really got this fantastic return, and it started with things like positive media coverage. Slate did a really nice piece on us. There were several other great pieces. Some were local, some were more national, but it was positive media coverage. It also was coverage that portrayed LSC in maybe a different light, in the legal services world in a different light. A lot of stories earlier had been about challenges on unmet legal need, which are absolutely critical, important issues to cover. But this was a little different. This was about how LSE was responding to it using new and exciting technology, and I think that really resonated with folks. We also had tremendous recognition from the courts, and I wanted to mention specifically our vision of 100% effective assistance to individuals who could not otherwise afford it was actually a vision adopted by both the U.S. Conference of Chief Justices and the Conference of State Court Administrators. So it's something that started with LSC, but those communities, which are just absolutely critical partners in the access to justice effort, both really liked the idea and signed on to it. And I think now we have some tremendous national support from those important organizations. And then the third thing that came out of this, and perhaps the most exciting, was we were able to translate it into private funding from foundations and from the business community. And there are several examples of the private funding that we've received, but I think the most exciting one comes from earlier this year, when LSC, in partnership with Microsoft and Pro Bono Net, announced a national initiative funded by Microsoft. Microsoft is going to put in at least $1 million in funding, resources, services. I mean, we have Microsoft project managers who are working with us on this effort. But it's a national initiative to actually create two demo portals across the country, and the portals really go back to the concept presented in our Tech Summit report. That's going to be actually implemented in 2 states, and we're going to begin a competitive process for choosing those states here pretty soon. But even if you read through our press release from April on the announcement of this project, we take things back to that Tech Summit report, and it was really that vision that helped us get to a point where private funders, the business community, is coming in and supporting these initiatives. So that's kind of our grand vision for technology going forward. But another thing that I think we've done pretty well is we've defined what our expectations are among grantees and also I think the broader legal aid community about the type of technology that should be in a legal aid office today. And so this is another document that we've prepared. It came out last year. I think it's still very applicable in 2016. We call it our baselines document, but it is a comprehensive look at technologies that we think should be in place, and it ranges from very new or emerging areas such as mobile, cloud computing. Information security is not new, but I'd say the emphasis that's being put on it is new. So we cover security in a great deal of depth in the baselines as well. We also look at social media, a lot of kind of web-focused, web presence type of technologies. And then there's the very basic stuff. I mean, you can see here, we talk about calendaring, document production, networking. But what this document really does is it tells us, or it tells a legal aid organization kind of what are the needed capacities or functions around specific technologies in a legal aid office. What are the considerations that go into implementing them? If you're currently deficient in a particular area, how can you go about implementing them? And then there's this tremendous array of resources that are out there nationally, and sometimes they're not necessarily curated as well as they need to be, but what we tried to do with the baselines document is collect all the helpful resources in particular particular technology subjects and include those as an extra column that folks can access. I should say too, these are both publicly accessible documents. I think a lot of what's in there could work internationally as well. And our intent, particularly with the baselines document, was that this would be applicable to organizations outside the LSC funded community. So other U.S. organizations that are not LSC funded but are doing legal aid work, and I'd venture to say that internationally that it would apply as well. So I think that's our vision, in terms of what we want to see currently, what we think technology can do going forward. And another important part of this ecosystem is the idea of having the infrastructure in place that allows for easy replication of projects. And before I get into the specific projects, I'll just kind of go through some points about our general philosophy in this area, why we felt like it was important to build a national infrastructure, and kind of some of the thoughts that went into how we approach doing so. The first thing, and I think this is obvious to folks who work in the legal aid world, is that the expertise in legal aid offices is in the providing of legal services to low-income people. That's where folks are subject matter experts, not necessarily in supporting and maintaining technology. So we wanted to make sure that the technology that we developed was both easy to use and that the systems that were in place really reduced the learning curve for adopting that technology. And you'll see a lot of the efforts that we funded nationally have, in addition to a technology platform, there is a support system that's built in as well, where there's actual experts who come in and can provide specific organizations with technical assistance. They can provide trainings, national kind of meetup, virtual meetup, webinar type of events, and also, maintain email listservs and documentation and things like that. So, we're funding these through kind of, one entity or one project team, but part of that project team is not just maintaining the technical infrastructure, it's also supporting the community and making sure that they have what they need to implement the technologies. Another part of our approach is, as a national funder in the U.S., and having sort of this national perspective where we don't necessarily know what everything grantees are doing with respect to technology, but we, I think have a general understanding of what's going on. We really feel like we're in a place where we can steer things so that we're not avoiding wasteful duplication of work. We recognize that funds are limited, and typically when an organization kind of begins its effort to develop technology, there's a real tendency to maybe talk with local vendors or vendors you know and worked with before. And I've noticed that a lot of them will push, that they are happy to build you whatever you are asking for, because that's their business, that's what they do, and they will do that even if a similar product in some cases already exists and is just as good as what's available. So if you give them $200,000, they'll build it. They'll promise it will be better, but from my experience, I found that is not always the case. So I'll talk a little bit more about how we've done that kind of within our program. And then the final point is just the need to remain flexible. We have this opportunity to kind of serve as advisors and kind of part of the steering group on these projects, but ultimately what they really need to do is respond to the needs of the field. And so we feel like our responsibility is to make sure those needs are reflected on the projects as they are developed. And as they iterate as well. So one I want to focus on is our statewide website network. We have a network of statewide websites across the country, right now in 49 states, soon again in 50 states. There was a little bit of a change in a program, but I think we're moving towards getting that 50th statewide website back up. Some of these are fantastic websites that have legal information targeted to clients. They have a lot of interactive tools, including document assembly tools, which I know is something that you're going to be talking about. If you haven't talked about yet, we'll be talking a fair amount about today. And things like videos, more app-like features that guide people through a legal process, and extensive referral systems as well. So these website networks have existed, the website network has existed for about 15, 16 years. Most of the statewide websites have been around about that long too. And this is truly a national initiative for us. We've built with using TIG funding. We've worked with partners to build 2 website templates that are available to grantees. One is the Law Help template, which is maintained by a nonprofit called Pro Bono Net, which does a lot of legal aid technology work. The second was initially an open source template. I'd say it's actually evolved more into an open source community where people use the open source software, but do their own implementations and then go about sharing things through modules and things like that. And that uses the Drupal module, or I'm sorry, the Drupal platform, which is a very common content management system around the world. But our focus here was we could have built, I think, many templates, or we could have funded states to just go ahead and build their own websites with whatever platform they wanted to use. But by keeping it to 2, which I think are different enough that folks still have some nice options, we're able to continue to invest in those templates, to add functionality to them over time, and also to port things that work successfully in one state pretty easily over to another state. So in the Drupal world, that's done through module development and making these modules available through a service like GitHub, and then another provider can download them and implement them on their site. On Law Help, which is a more controlled environment, the Law Help team actually develops the tool on their own, and then implements it into the platform. And as part of funding for these sorts of projects, they have to then make that feature available to all the other states in the country that are using the Law Help template. Now, our best example of a statewide website, and the ones that's most successful, and I think really kind of highlights the impact these things can have in 2016, is really the Illinois Legal Aid online site. I mean, it's the best site in the country. The justice community of Illinois deserves a lot of credit because they invest significantly in the statewide website, and it's had a significant impact on the legal needs of low-income people in the state. And one of the nice things that the new version of Illinois Legal Aid Online does, they did a redesign this summer was it actually lists information kind of by the numbers on their front page of their site, and it just gives you a glimpse of what the impact actually is here. We're talking 18 million visits since 2001, 41,000 court forms assembled through the document assembly software, and then a significant mobile use as well. And there's other great examples of sites like New York, Connecticut, Michigan, Washington State. They've all developed these really great statewide websites, all while working kind of in this national community together and sharing things. And just to give you one final example of kind of how this works with the statewide websites, Illinois moved from a kind of a proprietary self-built content management system over to Drupal this summer, and this was one of the most exciting developments for me in the legal aid community in a while, because it means that all of the great functionality that Illinois is going to develop on its Drupal site will be much more easy to transfer to the other Drupal sites across the country. And I'd say, about close to half of our statewide websites are using Drupal right now. So as they get special funding to build features, those will become available to all other legal aid programs. So the other national project that I think has been tremendously successful for us is Law Help Interactive. And this is a project, it's a national document assembly project. And I think folks in the room are pretty comfortable with the concept of document assembly and automated forms. Hopefully that's a fair characterization.
Actually, David, we don't have a lot of it north of the border. My Law BC is certainly leading the charge here in Canada, but it isn't something that we've done a lot of in terms of the legal aid community. So we're learning.
We're worth a quick overview. So a big challenge, and folks may know this, but from my experience working in a courthouse, a huge challenge is pro se litigants trying to fill out a court form. And in Illinois, in Chicago, where I was, you would get carbon paper that allowed you to fill out the form in triplicate, and a complaint, for instance, would basically, have your kind of boilerplate information at the top, and then would have a giant box that a pro se litigant was supposed to draft a legal complaint within that area, and it never worked. It was incredibly difficult for folks to do, even if the writing was legible. They had really very little guidance on what to actually put within that document. In some cases, it was very, very necessary. So, complaints are one thing, but we were talking answers in eviction cases and other critical documents that really had to be filled out for a person to meet their legal need. And so what document assembly does is basically takes that court form, breaks it up using the software into a series of logical, organized questions that the user then answers, and then at the end of the process, and there's a bit of intelligence built in there, so that it's going through and kind of analyzing a user's legal issue in many cases as well. But it goes through with the user, goes through that process, and then at the end of it, it delivers out a first of all, an electronic, it's a Word document or a PDF or an RTF file, but it delivers a very professional-looking legal document, court form, letter, whatever it may be, that the user can then use on their behalf to meet their legal need. And it's something that obviously self-represented litigants really like, because they go from a very frustrating process to something that feels much easier and in many ways empowering. It's also something that courts really like, because a judge gets a handwritten legal document that they're supposed to analyze, and it's very difficult for them to do. Whereas this is something that's in the format that's appropriate for the court, and it outlines the what the litigant is trying to do in a much clearer manner. So this has been an area that we are really excited about, really trying to invest in. Going back to our Tech Summit report, it's a priority within that report, so it's very much a central part of our vision. And again, I think there are multiple ways you could approach this, right? So you could work with different grantees across the country to create different document assembly solutions, and one developer could build something, and then another developer could. But I think one thing that we've done really well is that we've been very focused on one document assembly platform that can be used across the United States, that is flexible enough that it works for individual states that have different requirements, but is uniform and consistent enough that the experience of authoring these court forms and making them available can be kind of standardized and much easier for folks that are trying to do it. And so that's what we've done with Law Help Interactive. And it's free for any legal aid provider in the U.S. to use, and I think it's something that they would be interested in international expansion as well. So if this is an area that you think is promising, it's certainly something that they'd be willing to have the project team would be willing to have some conversations about making this happen, beyond the U.S. To give you an idea of how many documents we've assembled with this, because I think it's really worth noting how successful this has been. Since 2005, we've been able to generate 2.7 million documents, and those either go directly to self-represented litigants, or they're going to a legal aid advocate or pro bono attorney who's providing some sort of assistance to those to those individuals, low-income individuals in need of a legal assistance. What's interesting is if you compare this to LegalZoom, which I think a lot of folks know LegalZoom. I don't know if it's in Canada, but it's a big deal here in the U.S.
Please go. Let us know.
Okay, great. Well, so I got to say, the one thing about LegalZoom, I think you all know about it because if you listen to an American-produced podcast, LegalZoom is inevitably the sponsor of that podcast. They're kind of ubiquitous in the podcast world. But it's the same sort of concept. It's document assembly for a range of legal documents that people need. Now, it's much more targeted to small businesses, to kind of middle class, maybe even upper income folks who want to who are kind of part of this do-it-yourself movement and don't want to pay an attorney to do something they think they can do on their own. That's more their target audience. But they're a large company here in the U.S. They have, I think, about 200 employees in Austin, Texas now, and some significant funding has gone into that company as well. So we've done 2.7 million documents since 2005. LegalZoom, a much larger endeavor, has done since 2001. They say that they've served 3.6 million customers. So depending on how you slice it, we're actually a little ahead of LegalZoom in terms of the number of documents and the number of customers that we're assisting through our document assembly solution. But another benefit of having this nationally is just being able to aggregate that data. And part of what I do is take what we see as successes of the TIG program and communicate those back to Congress, which is our funder, and to show that this is a worthwhile investment of taxpayer money. By having this central portal for document assembly, we regularly get reports from about the number of assemblies, the top states that are using this, which is good for outreach to individual members of Congress in specific areas. But it's a really great way to get that information and demonstrate that this is a great investment of taxpayer money.
David, we're getting a bit short on time, and we've only got about a minute left.
That's great. Well, let me. How about I wrap up with questions? I apologize that I have gone a little bit over here.
We probably have time for one question if someone did have a question. I was just a little bit curious about the. Oh, we do have a question. Sorry, Carl Martiner, our CIO at Legal Aid Ontario.
Hi, David. Excellent presentation. One of the things that you noted in Illinois and including across America, with the clients, how are you finding, for example, in communicating, are you using email? And because one of the things we've been researching is around how do you find a main way to transact with the client. And what we're noticing is email appears to be a very reliable means. But what's your experience with that? Is that a trend, and where do you think it's going in terms of main communication medium?
We're doing, our grantees I think are doing a fair amount with email. I will say an area that we're exploring a lot, though, is the use of text messaging to communicate with clients. We're finding that a huge portion of our client community uses text messaging on a regular basis, and then also that the read and respond rates to text messaging are much higher than the read respond rates to a medium like email or to a phone call or something like that. So, I think email is definitely part of the equation, but in terms of getting a quick response, communicating things like reminders, including critical reminders about showing up to court or showing up to a legal aid appointment, we're thinking that SMS might be the better direction to go there.
Well, David, I'm going to wrap it up there. Listen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, you're very welcome. Sorry, I went over a little bit.
No worries. Thanks very much. And for everybody else, the next session begins at 11:50, and that is online mediation and resolution. Thank you very much. Thanks, David. I'll be in touch.
Okay. Thanks, Kristen. Take care.
Bye.